Hi, I'd like to welcome you to the first edition of Prophecy News Talk brought to you from the Golan Heights. My name is Adam Eliyahu Berkowitz. If you're here, it's because you're interested in all things prophecy and all things Messiah. My mission, my life's goal is to get the word out about those things. And that's why I need to make these videos. I've been writing articles on prophecy and the Messiah for Breaking Israel News for the last 3.5 years. Every day, I sit down and look for what's happening in Israel. And that shows me that the Messiah is coming. And after more than 2,000 articles, I can honestly say that something is always happening. In that time, I've written about the Sanhedrin, the Red Heifer, the Dead Sea coming to life, actual preparations for the Third Temple, and many more subjects. I'm sure you've heard of some of these stories, but if you didn't hear it directly from me, then you got it secondhand, and you might have even gotten it wrong. If you're interested in prophecy and how it's unfolding in Israel right now, if it's important to you that you get it firsthand and get it from an accurate source, then you need to hear it from me. In every episode, I plan to do a recap of one of the most astounding breaking prophecy stories of the week. I'm also going to interview a new person every week, someone who I believe is working hard to bring the redemption. And these folks are out there. And I'm proud to say that several of them are now my very dear friends. I'm also going to spend a little bit of time in every episode to tell you a little bit about the regular news that's happening in Israel. That's no less important because when it comes to the news about Israel, it's important to get it directly from the source. We all know how some media change the news to suit their agenda. Unless an Israeli is killed in an especially horrible attack, you'll never hear about it from the English language media. And we all know that God gave Judea and Samaria to the Jews. So any media that calls it the occupied territories is blaspheming and erasing the words of the Bible. God willing, in a few days, I'll be taking you with me as I go up to the Temple Mount. The United Temple Movement has called for a mass ascending to the holiest site in Judaism to protest a Muslim takeover of a very significant section of the Mount. And I'll be telling you more about that in the news segment of the show. So who am I? Well, my name is Adam Eliyahu Berkowitz. I was born in Philadelphia in 1961, and like most Jews, I was given an English name and a Hebrew name. My English name was Adam, and my Hebrew name was Eliyahu, so you get both of them. Well, I worked as a cook in fancy restaurants in Manhattan until I was 30 years old. And in 1991, I moved to Israel. I was not religious, nor did I have any intention of becoming religious. But the land of Israel, well, if you've ever been here, you know how that goes. I lived on Kibbutz Eliyahu for 5 years. And I raised baby cows in the dairy. That sincerely helped my soul to heal. And during that time, I served for a very short time in the IDF, and I was trained to be a combat medic. After that, I moved to Bahrain in Gush Etzion. That's about 20 minutes south of Jerusalem. And I sat and learned Torah in a yeshiva for 8 years, full-time, night and day. And I managed to convince a wonderful and holy woman named Dvorah Gila to marry me. And, well, so far so good. We have 4 children. It's a real blessing. And we live in a wonderful town called Katsrin. If you have any questions or comments, or if there's something you'd like me to find out for you, feel free to be in touch. My email is listed below. And hopefully as things go on, I'll loosen up and I won't have to read words off a page. And hopefully we'll also get to be friends. Thank you so much. Well, I said I wanted to start making these recordings because there was a lot of misinformation out there, actually lies about things that were very important having to do with what's happening with prophecy in Israel. Probably the most important issue, and the one that's really lied about the most, or the most misinformation, is about the Red Heifer. And I'd just like to say that anyone who does not speak Hebrew, anyone who has not spoken to Rabbi Azariah Ariel, who only speaks Hebrew, doesn't know what they're talking about. Let me tell you a little story. This is actually one of the big kick in the pants that started me making these videos. I was on Facebook, and I have a lot of really amazing Facebook friends. And there was a gentleman who reached out to me, said he wanted to connect with me. And then he started writing these horribly anti-Semitic things. And I was a bit confused. If he wants to be anti-Semitic, he can be as anti-Semitic as he wants, but why connect with me? He wanted to connect with me because he actually wanted to know about these prophetic events. He was Christian, though I'm not at all, God forbid, implying that all Christians are anti-Semitic, but he was horribly so. One of the things he said was that he was in charge of a Red Heifer project, which sincerely confused me. I didn't understand how he could be in charge of a Red Heifer project, why he would want to be in charge of a Red Heifer project, or why he would in any way want to imply that he was connected with it if he was that anti-Semitic. So what I wanted to do was I wanted to clear up some disinformation about that. So I wrote an article about the Red Heifer, and the article is what you see here about the imminent return of the Red Heifer, fact and fiction. I'm going to put the link below. And this was the result of a conversation I had with Rabbi Azariah Ariel. The Temple Institute, an organization that I really, really support and love. They've been working at recreating the temple utensils, educating about the temple, and everything having to do with preparations for bringing the third temple. There's a lot we can talk about, but I'd like to focus on the Red Heifer. And this Red Heifer project has been going on for years. One of the reasons is it's against Israeli law to import livestock. It's very, very difficult. So what they actually had to do was to import embryos and fertilize them inside cows in Israel, or eggs. And then those mothers gave birth to basically what is an Angus, which is a red cow. And the laws pertaining to red heifers, this is an actual photo of the actual red heifer with its mother that they're raising. The location has to remain secret because there are people, perhaps my friend or my not friend was one of them, who intend bad for the red heifer. They hate the idea of the third temple for either political or religious reasons. So if they knew where it was, they would bring harm to the red heifer. So the location is secret for now. And Rav Azariah Ariel, his father is Rav Yisrael Ariel. He's a biblical sage of massive proportions. He's a brilliant man who lives an incredibly holy lifestyle. And he was charged by the Temple Institute with being in charge of the Red Heifer project. And there's a lot to learn about the Red Heifer. He explained that it doesn't have to be red. When the Bible describes red, which in Hebrew is adom, Red Heifer is paraduma. They're not referring specifically to the color red. They're speaking, it can include brown, anything that is of the red family. But it must be completely and entirely red, without any hairs that are not red. And in addition, it must never have been worked. You can't even, if a child jumps on it, it then becomes unsuited for use. It can never be used for plowing. You can never put a blanket on it, and nothing may have ever rested on it. And in addition, it must be absolutely blemish-free. There's anyone who has worked on a farm with farm animals knows that requirements from the government are that you have to put in ID tags, usually within the first week. There are tags that usually go in the ear. That hole in the ear is a blemish, and it makes the animal unfit to be the red heifer. Also, as the Hebrew implies, para aduma, para is a cow, eglah is a calf. So we're talking about a fully grown cow, female cow, and that would be at 2 years of age. So it has to. So they check it to make sure that it is suited insofar as the color and no blemishes, but they have to continue to check it, really with magnifying glasses. They check it until it's 2 years old. At which time, if we're blessed that it should still be kosher for the ritual, then we can perform the ritual. There's a lot of misconceptions about the ritual. Having the red heifer will permit us. The red heifer ritual is intended. It is the only way for a Jew to become ritually pure from a state of impurity caused by contact or closeness with a dead body. This is the most severe form of ritual impurity. This is it's necessary if we want to reinstate the temple service. However, performing the ritual of the red heifer, preparing the ashes of the red heifer, does not require a temple, and it is not even performed on the Temple Mount. And if we have the ashes of the red heifer and we can become ritually pure, that does not necessarily mean that it's time for all the Jews to go, hoo-ha, let's go up to the Temple Mount and build the temple. That is a different story. However, Rav Ariel, like all religious Jews, his attitude is the Torah tells us to do it, so we have to do it. And if we have the ability to do it, then we surely should do it. And that's what his intention is. He was very, very, very insistent that I get across the message that this paragraph here is what he was very insistent about, and it's a very important point. I'd like to read it to you. He said, some people believe that by reinstating the ritual of the red heifer will bring the Messiah or reinstate the temple service. And this is an incorrect understanding. God does not do our bidding. We do his bidding. The Jews were given the Torah and commanded to do the mitzvahs. Mitzvot are Torah commandments. We have at least 613. It is not our intention to bring about a divine reaction through the red heifer. Our only interest is to perform the mitzvot, the Torah commandments, as they were given. The red heifer is a commandment, so we perform it. It will allow us to perform other mitzvot. Other than that, there are no expectations and no additional agenda. This is very important. There are a lot of people who entirely misunderstand this. And so we don't have to go up to the temple and reinstate the temple service, but we're commanded to do it. And there are even everyday mitzvahs that we do all the time that we cannot do in completeness because we do not have the red heifer. The Rav Ariel gave me the example of when a Jew bakes bread. What he does is we take a bit, if there's a sufficient quantity, we take a bit of the batter, of the dough, and we separate it and we burn it. The reason is we are not allowed to make dough without giving a bit, a specific amount, to the temple, to the priests. And since we are ritually impure and the Kohanim, the priests, are ritually impure, we do not do that. We burn it. And having the ashes of the red heifer would permit us to do that in completeness, to actually give the dough to the Kohanim. So that would mean we would be permitted to do yet another mitzvah. There are many, many mitzvot like that we are not able to do in completeness now because we do not have the ashes of the red heifer. Having the ashes would permit us to do that. As I said, the red heifer does not require the temple. The red heifer is actually burned outside of the temple. The people are purified outside of the temple. The The ashes can be stored outside of the temple, and they were stored out of the temple. As a matter of fact, the ashes of the red heifer were continued to be used even after the temple was destroyed. So this is our requirement, and Rav Azaria Ariel is working towards this. As I said, anyone who says differently than what I've stated on this video is incorrect and spreading false information. If you have any other questions about this, any comments, please feel free to contact me. I'll be happy to answer any questions that I can. You should know that the red heifer and the ashes of the red heifer it's one of the more inexplicable mitzvot, commandments that's written about in the Bible. So as best I can, and if not, I'll try to find someone who can answer it correctly. In any case, that was very important for me to present as the first prophecy story. And as I said, we are very, very close. The calf is a few months old. God willing, in a year and a half, we may be blessed to actually have a full-grown red heifer, and we can actually do the ceremony. That may be in a year and a half, and I'll be sure to report on that as well. In the meantime, the ashes of the red heifer that you read about in the Bible are actually being worked on right now, we're moving forward in that, which I think is truly a blessed and amazing thing. You remember when I said that some of the most important stories are either being misreported or not reported at all on the mainstream media? Well, this is certainly the case when it comes to what's happening at the Temple Mount. I know because it's not even being reported in the proper manner in the Israeli press. A lot of people may say, how dare those Jews, how dare those Israelis bother the Muslims on the Temple Mount and change the status quo. I'd like to address that. There's a story that's been happening where the Muslims have taken over a part of the Temple Mount. It's a very special part of the Temple Mount. The place they've taken over is called Shar Rachamim in Hebrew, or I believe Christians know it as the Golden Gate. Shar Rachamim literally translates as the Gate of Mercy. About 2 weeks ago, the Muslims they rioted, thousands of them on the Temple Mount, and they broke open gates that had been locked shut 16 years ago. And they went down. There were stairs, stone stairs going down into a small courtyard, and that led into a relatively small enclosure that was under the main level on the Temple Mount. So it was underground. They declared it to be a mosque and a place they should pray. I started realizing that there was going to be a problem a few days before because I follow the Palestinian media, and they started complaining that the gates were locked and that they called for the Palestinian Muslims to protest that. I thought that was kind of a little confusing because I've been up there and those gates are always locked. They're locked to Muslims and they're locked to Jews. Jews cannot go down there. And the reason was 16 years ago, that place was being used by an organization that was affiliated with Hamas. Hamas really has no place in Israel. It's not only considered a terrorist organization by Israel, it's also considered, the U.S. State Department has listed it as a terrorist organization. So, and the fact that they should use a religious site to meet was entirely out of bounds. So they broke open these gates, which are actually only waist high, and the lock itself was, I could have broken it by myself. So they made a big deal out of nothing, and I knew that they really intended to make a big deal about it, even though there was no pushback from the Israeli government. And in fact, after they took over the location, there was no pushback, and the Israeli government allowed them to be there. And it's been 2 weeks. So you can see here the site, that's the entirety of the underground site. It's not large at all. The significance of the site is, if you read in Ezekiel, it says that is the gate that the Messiah will enter through. I believe the Christians have a tradition. I'm sorry, I know very little about Christianity, but come on, Christianity and Judaism, we at least have one set of books in common. Ezekiel says that that's where the Messiah will come. I believe the Christians have a tradition that is the gate that Jesus rode in on a donkey. So if you see also, you can see in this photo that there's a cemetery, an Arab cemetery. These are the outer gates that were sealed up 500 years ago by the Ottoman Empire, by the Muslims, by the Muslims. And they were sealed up, and a cemetery was established just outside the gate in order to prevent the Messiah from entering, because the Muslims have their own version of the Messiah. They call him Mahdi. And Islam is, in its very essence, replacement theology. They believe that all of the biblical characters were Muslim, and just the people who followed them got it wrong and were not Muslim. Adam in the Garden of Eden was a Muslim, according to Islam. Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Noah. These are written about in the Quran, and they're all Muslim. So to even see another version. Oh, and of course, Jesus was appropriated by Islam. They say that Jesus was a Muslim, and he figures most prominently in their eschatology, in their end of days vision. It's for another story. But any reminder that other religions exist is an in-your-face to the Muslims that they have failed in replacing or eliminating all the other religions. So they cannot have any situation in which there's a possibility that any other Messiah will arrive except for the Islamic Messiah, what they call Mahdi. So they put a cemetery outside the gate in order to prevent the Messiah from coming, in the belief that the Messiah would not go over graves, because that would impart ritual impurity. In fact, they got that wrong, because if the Messiah is going to come from the Kohanic tradition, the Kohanic house, which is what I believe both Jews and Christians believe, he will, the bodies of non-Jews do not impart ritual impurity, so there's no problem with that. That's a misunderstanding by the Muslims. So they took over this area here, and for 2 weeks, there's been a lot of back and forth. The Israeli government saying they don't like it. Bibi Netanyahu said to the police, you got to shut it down. No mosque there. The Israeli High Court has also said so. However, nothing has been done. Technically, the Temple Mount is under the supervision of Jordan. That was established between Moshe Dayan and Jordan after the 1967 war. And they established an Islamic authority. It was established before, called the Waqf. And the Waqf is in charge of the Temple Mount. They're very connected to the Palestinian Authority, though there's a lot of the conflict on the Temple Mount is a power play not between Israel and the Palestinians, though that's certainly true. It's also a power play between the Palestinians and the Jordanians. So the Waqf wants it to stay open as a mosque. The interesting thing is that if you criticize Israel on this First of all, I have 2 points to make. Israel conquered the Temple Mount in 1967. It's ours. You say it's an Islamic holy site. It's actually not. There are 2 domes on the Temple Mount, one silver and one gold. The gold is the Dome of the Rock, Hamal Sharif, and the silver one is Al-Aqsa. So when the Muslims refer to Al-Aqsa and they point at the golden dome, they're lying. They got it wrong. They now call the entire Temple Mount Al-Aqsa, which is entirely wrong. Al-Aqsa was actually the silver dome, which was established as a mosque, as a place to pray. Why? Because when Muhammad first began his religion, he was, whatever you want to call it, his movement, it was based very heavily on Judaism. So they prayed in the direction of Jerusalem, which was universally accepted as a holy city. And then after he took over Mecca, he took over Medina, and there were a lot of Jewish merchants there. He demanded that the Jews convert, and they did. And he said, but the problem was that they kind of fudged it. They said, yeah, we'll convert, but they kept being Jews. And one of the things a Jew does is he prays in the direction of Jerusalem. So in order to identify who was a real Muslim and who was a fake Muslim, he made it absolutely forbidden to pray in the direction of Jerusalem. So Al-Aqsa was established on the Temple Mount. First they built the Dome of the Rock on the site of the Holy of Holies, the temple, but it was forbidden to pray there or pray in that direction. So they specifically chose the site for Al-Aqsa, the mosque, for prayer, so that they would turn their backs, their behinds, in the direction of the site of the temples, which was the center, the heart of Jerusalem. The Dome of the Rock is clearly not holy to the Muslims. It's the antithesis of holy. There's a whole long other story. Hopefully, God willing, one day I'll bring on Dr. Mordechai Kedar, and he will explain it much better than me. Jerusalem actually has no place in Islam, and especially the Temple Mount has no place in Islam. But in any case, the Waqf took over this place, the Sha'ar Rachamim, the Gate of Mercy. And it's really important to note the second criticism people can have of the Israeli government is that by closing it, they will change the status quo. The status quo means what was, the situation that was. And when Israel conquered the Temple Mount, there was literally one mosque on the Temple Mount. That was Al-Aqsa. Since 1967, there are now, this place at Sha'ar Rachamim will now be the 5th mosque on the Temple Mount. There are 4 mosques that have been established since Israel conquered the Temple Mount. One of them, it's an interesting story. One of them, Solomon's Stables, it was never, the name is a misnomer. Solomon, of course, never kept horses on the Temple Mount. He built a holy temple. He would not, it might have been used by the Crusaders as stables, but that's something different. Solomon's Stables, like this area, is underground, but it's huge. It's really large. And Rav Mordechai Eliyahu, in the 1990s, I believe it was, he said, hey, it'd be nice to have a synagogue up there. And there's this totally unused place that's actually full of refuse that's been collected over the last, 1,000 years. Let's turn it into a synagogue. It's convenient. We could open up a gate so that the Jews would not have to come into contact with the Arabs. There would be no conflict there. And for reasons it would solve a lot of issues having to deal with ritual purity. So it's fine. Let's do it. The moment he said that, the Waqf began construction against the law, against international law, against Israeli law, against the agreement, explicitly against the agreement between Israel and Jordan. They built Solomon's Stables. It now is a mosque that goes largely unused, the Marwani Mosque, that can seat 10,000 people. And as I said, it goes largely unused because there's plenty of room. Anyone who goes up to Temple Mount knows that it's huge. When the Muslims take places, they don't have to. There's plenty of room up there for everyone. There's plenty of room for a synagogue, plenty of room for a church. So what's actually happening is that the Palestinians are claiming that we are changing the status quo. We want to change the status quo. And by using that claim, they then change the status quo, grab more. They're not adhering to any of their agreements. So that's really what's happening on the Temple Mount. Right now, the King of Jordan, King Abdullah, is in America meeting with congressmen about other issues and about this issue as well. Right now, there's no forward motion. The Muslims, the Waqf, has requested from the Israeli police permission to bring up construction materials, construction equipment to do renovations, to convert it into a mosque permanently. And the Israeli police have not yet said no, which I believe means they have not yet said yes. It should be noted that the last time the Waqf did renovations and converted an area into a mosque was the Marwani Shul. They took tons and tons of earth out of the area and dumped it in a dumping ground. The problem with that was that they just dumped it and just dug with large tractors, and then claimed that they saw no signs of any temples or any archaeological remains. Then along came Gabriel Barkai, an amazing archaeologist, who went, and he has the sifting project, and he went through all the dirt that they took off the Temple Mount and sifted it and found enormous amounts of artifacts from the Second Temple. He's reconstructed part of the Second Temple floor. He's found just innumerable artifacts. So the fear is that if the Muslims establish a mosque there, first of all, the fear is, of course, that they will begin using it again as a meeting place for Hamas, a center for Hamas. The second is that they will cause irreparable damage to Second Temple artifacts, or First Temple artifacts, perhaps. There were even alongside of the gate, for years, there were timbers that were underneath a tarp. And they looked like they were just garbage thrown off to the side, when actually they were being sold at one point for scrap. And someone managed to get their hands on it. And these were timbers that dated from early First Temple all the way through to Second Temple. And they were just thrown off to the side, neglected. And even I saw an article in 2012 where they were being used for a bonfire, which was very peculiar. So there is a very real fear that if the Muslims take over the Sha'ar HaChamim, they will cause irreparable damage to artifacts and antiquities that just date back to the Second Temple. In addition, they're doing this very clearly to establish dominance over the site. And at this point, I'd like to throw out a personal opinion. My opinion is Islam is the fastest growing religion in the world. I try to respect other religions. There are a lot of things about Islam that I just cannot respect. I think the reason why Islam is managing to establish dominance in the world is simply because they're on the Temple Mount. It is a power spot. It grants power to whoever prays there. And it's amazing, it's remarkable that the Muslims allow the Jews to walk around up there, which, okay, but they don't allow us to pray. Apparently, they believe that our prayers actually have a lot of impact, which is interesting. I wish I could believe that about my own prayer. And I believe that spot, praying on that spot, having dominance at that spot, gives them a power to go out into the world. And that's another reason why I think we need to stop this. I recently saw a video, a gentleman who was very critical of a lot of my articles, and they were saying, the Jews just want to go up there and take over. And then he said something that shocked me. This was supposedly a devout Christian. He said, and that once they do that, they won't let us anywhere near it. The only person who can make a comment like that is someone who's never read the Bible. It's a house of prayer for all nations. Yes, the Jews are supposed to be a kingdom of priests. We'll be serving as priests for the rest of the world. But what's a priest without someone to bring to worship? The main point is not the priest, but the main point is the people he serves, the people who come to pray. It will be a house of prayer for all nations. That's the prophecy. It will not be a synagogue, a place for exclusive Jews. And even when Solomon established the temple, he asked God to hear the prayer of the foreigner, meaning Solomon established his temple as a place of worship for everyone. And God willing, that'll be the third temple as well. Right now, the problem is not that the Muslims are in charge of the Temple Mount. The problem is that the Muslims have a monopoly on the Temple Mount. They're the only ones praying up there. And even someone who is pluralistic and left-wing and liberal, great. I believe, I'm an old hippie, but where's your pluralism? Where's your equality value? This is the antithesis of the equality of religion. This is the antithesis of pluralism. This is Muslims grabbing more and more and saying no one else can pray here. This is a very important battle. It's a very important episode. The mainstream media are absolutely not talking about it. Keep the faith, follow this, think about it, pray for it. We all know that good things happen to people who pray for the peace of Jerusalem. Thank you so much. Be blessed.